My hat! I finally received this Rocket V6 21.5. This is a Surpass. Now, lately I've been working with 21.5 because that's generally what I use. At some point, maybe I'll do some other turn motors, but we'll see. Right now, 21.5, that happens to be my interest as of the time of this video. Now, I'm going to cover my thoughts, just visual inspection, then compare it to some of the motors that I have over here on the side. Then after that, I'm going to measure the rotor Gauss strength, and then I'll talk about KVs, and I'll run the test on the analyzer. Now, first impressions, as you can see, this thing is, I don't want to say it's blinged out, but maybe that is the term. So you have these brass looking, maybe they're supposed to be gold, screws that are holding everything together. And then you have the silver from just the machining, which is actually very nice. This motor is very well machined. Now this part here, I don't have the motor, but this actually reminds me of other motors that I've had before. And I can't think if it's not the Team Powers, it's a different motor that has a similar end here on this side. Now the back, I mean, it's not quite, it has two sensor ports like the Hobbywing, but it looks nothing like the Hobbywing. But one of the things that caught my attention is if you look at the wires, well, first of all, this disc here, this looks like an R1. So it looks very similar to the R1, so I wonder where they get the parts. But you can't really tell in the camera, but the wires are quite thick. Now, I'm not going to take apart all of the motors and measure them, but just visually, they look quite thick. So this is a much more. So this is their Outlaw. And the wires are very similar. Actually, the Surpass wires look they look thicker. Now, something that could happen in motors, for example, is you can take one wire, thicker wire, and then spin it around X amount of times, or you can take two thinner wires and spin them the same amount of times. So maybe they just decided to go with a thicker wire for this one, but that's something that caught my attention right off the bat. Now, there is a difference though in the lamination. So if I measure, I'm just going to go ahead and measure the laminations right here. And then I'm going to show you the Surpass. They are actually, they're small, but they might be fine. Right now I'm comparing them to the much more. So that's the reason why. So we're looking at about 20, let's just call it 2004. Let's see if I can keep on the camera. Now this is the much more, so let's see what the much more is. Much more, if I go all the way to the edge, let's see, is there a better place to measure? This one doesn't really have a place where I can measure, as well as the other one. Let's see, all right. Oops, that's about right. Oh, they're the same. All right, so laminations are the same. So, yeah, so it's about 20. So laminations are the same. Let me check out the Hobbywing. Hobbywing, based on feel, a little smaller. Maybe it's just one little lamina that's missing. So that's surprising. They look small, but they're not small. So it's just a, visually, it's a trick. But the wires, you cannot see. This one's sort of installed. These, on the Surpass, look thicker than the Hobbywing. The Hobbywing, the wires look very similar to this one, to the much more. This one appears to use thicker wire. Again, I don't know. Maybe maybe it's the way this is made. What I mean by that is maybe just visually, it's tricking my eyes into making it look like the wire is actually thicker, but it looks thicker. Now, if we look at this one, I wonder if the camera can catch it. The wire, anyway, visually, the wires look thicker than the Helix as well. Let's see. Well, kind of. I mean, maybe they're similar, maybe they're the same thickness, but they look thicker. Now, one of the things that I'm noticing here, and I'm not measuring, is if you look at the diameter of the loop. So as this loop, right, gets around right here, as it loops around, this one's a thinner loop than this one. This is a much wider loop. So that is something that visually you can easily see. So that loop right in there. This one's somewhere in the middle. This one's closer to the helix. This one seems to have thinner loops. So we'll see. Now, other than that, the packaging is actually very nice. So it comes in this little box. The foam, this looks like the exact same foam that the helix has. Now, that really doesn't really say anything. It just means that they probably order their packaging from the same vendor. That's about it. I mean, I can't imagine there being one maker for each brand of motors. That would make no sense. But anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and put the much more away, the helix away, and I'm gonna start with the rotor strength on the Surpass, and we'll see how it does, and then I'll bring up the data, and then after that we'll do KVs. Now, I've seen many rotors, but as of now I can't really remember what this rotor reminds me of. I can't think if it reminds me of, it looks similar to, I think Trinity rotors are very similar, with the epoxy to balance, and then just the way this little end cap here is built, and then the rear as well. Hobbywing rotors are a little different. I mean, here's one, for example. So there's a difference. But I have used rotors that are similar to this. Maybe it was a Reedy. To be honest, I can't remember. Maybe it is a Trinity. So let's go ahead and see. Wow. To be honest, the strength on this thing is actually really good. This is generally the strength that you would get off of the Hobbywings, for example, or Helix. These are similar Gauss ratings, so if it's about 1700, that's pretty good. So this is over 1700, 1725. I think that's good. I'm saying that now, but we're going to compare it to the data. But let's see. So I wonder if this is 25. It looks like 24 actually. So it looks like a short rotor. So this might be an RPM. Oh, 25. It is 25. Well, I mean, it's a millimeter, so I'm not that good. So about a 25.3. So we're looking at about 25.3. And then body is about a, that would be a 12.5, so 12.46 for the body. So this would be a stock rotor. That's what this one would be, or a spec rotor. It looks really nice. So we can look at the data, and then after it, I am going to go ahead and assemble everything. This looks very much like the much more, very similar. I hate this. I think Reedy does it too, where they have this little bridge on top. So you have to install it here and then do that. Fit the rotor in there with the shims. So I have to put the shims, everything together. Anyway, then after that, toward the end, I'll do the KVs and then compare it to some of the other 21.5 motors, see how it compares on paper. So here are the numbers. I'm going to begin with Gauss. Now, really quick, this motor is actually really good at price point. I don't remember exactly how much I paid. I want to say, as of this video, I paid approximately $86 shipped from Hong Kong, roughly. But you can find them elsewhere. They might be a little more. If you find them for less, I would say go ahead and grab a few. Just the build quality looks very good. There's features that resemble some of the other more popular race brands, I guess one could say. For example, R1, Trinity and some others. The rotor, I think the rotor looks like a Trinity, but I don't have a rotor with me to compare. That front plate, that does look like an R1, but this one, I mean, shoots the R1 out of the water. It's no contest. But anyway, I mean, based on paper. So here we go. So Surpass. So we are down here. So this rotor was a 1725, 1728. These are very good numbers. This is on a 21.5 rotor. So these are very, very good numbers. And if we compare it to, let's say, I think the 19, this is the Trinity. This is the stock or the spec rotor for Trinity. 1707, 1706. They're close enough. I mean, the difference is in the weather. So that's the first thing. Now, again, I have nothing to prove. Now, the color on this one is black. The color on this one, I believe, is a copper color. I don't remember as of right now. I would have to look them up. But I believe this one's a copper color. But it doesn't take much for a company to build one for one manufacturer with one color and then replace the color or whatever it is for another. It doesn't matter. Whoever's making magnets is making magnets. But let's see. Now, if we compare it to some of the other ones, so again, 1725, keep that in mind. This is the Team Powers. Now, this rotor, if you remember, if you've watched that video, it's actually, I think it was an 11.5 diameter rotor instead of this, what was this, 12.3, 12.5? I don't remember. But anyway, this was surprisingly thin. So let's go and much more. So if we compare to much more definitely, now this is the Outlaw. This one definitely has a stronger rotor. And it's noticeable. Well, I mean, I haven't run this one, but anyway, it's probably very noticeable based on paper, considering it draws low amps compared to some other brands and has higher KVs. But if we go back into spec, here we go, Helix. This is one of the motors I like. So I really like the Helix. Notice it's spot on with the Helix. I mean, it's hard to get closer to those numbers than can be. So this is the Helix. Now, Helix, surprisingly, RPM is really good. Hobbywing, I think, is bulletproof. So if you were to ask me which one I would take, the Helix RS or the Hobbywing, that's a really tough one for me to answer. I have them both. I think the Hobbywing is bulletproof. I think their R&D is pretty good. They seem to be somewhat independent. I'm not sure about Helix, to be honest. I think that's more of a East Coast thing. So not really sure. Not many people run them around here. But let's see. But I could be wrong. Let's see. We'll ignore these. Those were fun to test, though. 21s. Here we go. Hobbywing, just stock. Okay, we'll ignore that. We don't care about that one. G4. G4. So this is a G4 right here. 1708, 1703. Right? That Surpass is right on. It's actually a little stronger than this, but the point is, it's right on. With the Hobbywing, the Helix, when it comes to rotor strength, and the dimensions are pretty good. Trinity, oh, here we go, 1119, 1701, 1735. Now that's one of the rotors I tested. What do I have over here? This was a different rotor, so I had two rotors. One of those is off of my Xfactor, and the other one's off of a slot machine, more than likely. That's the difference. But anyway, they're right on there. And then, well, if we look at the R1, this is the model of R1s. I'm not saying all R1s are like this. I mean, it's close. But that's what we have. So out of the box, this comes with timing at 30, according to the N-Bell. So I've gone ahead and moved it to, I was aiming for 43, because there's no point in running them in 30 degrees, and the reason why is it's just way too low. Amp draw is generally about 2 amps. That's the reason why. So let's go. But keep in mind, rotor strength is very important. If you have a very strong rotor and very high KV, you probably have a very good stator. And the reason why is if you have seen my videos, really old videos where I test different Trinity motors and I swap out rotors, one of the things to notice is if it's the same diameter, so say the dimensions are the same on the rotor, the one with the higher Gauss will generally have less kV, more torque. The one with less Gauss will generally have higher RPM. It's easier to spin it fast. Now, if you have two rotors, same strength, but one of them is smaller diameter tends to turn faster. Also less torque because it's a smaller diameter. So think of leverage, so lever arm. And you have a greater gap between the surface area of the rotor and the stator. So those are some of the things. So in other words, if we're comparing motors from different brands and the dimensions are similar, let's just say very, very similar, and one motor has a stronger rotor and higher kV, probably has a better stator. All right, now I have the Surpass here 2 times. So Surpass is the parent company, and Rocket RC would be the division V6. Now, this is the first time I buy one. To be honest, I do apologize. I forgot who recommended this motor, but thank you so much. If you put your name on the chat, I would appreciate it, just so I can thank you for recommending this motor. But I've purchased some of the other Surpass motors in the past, mainly the larger stuff for, say, short course or monster trucks. You know, the good old El Cheapo. You can get an ESC that always overheats or heatsink breaks off, whatever. Actually, motors aren't bad. It reminds me of Ghoul RC. But this one, wow, the quality is very nice, looks very nice. It's a little too flashy for me, to be honest. I wish it was a little more simple. But they actually played around with the design. But I was impressed with the numbers. So the numbers, I start 44 degrees, 47, then 48. Because other than that, you start going a little too high. Amp really climbs up. Heat is an issue as amps go up. But staying in the 40s, this is very good. I mean, 47, 48 without dipping into the 50s, that's really good. But I want to have the Xfactor up here. So these are some of the old motors, so I don't really care. These are some of the newer motors down here. That's the reason why, as of this video. But if we compare it to the Xfactor, so here we go, 5.6, 5.6. So if I go based on amps, the Surpass is doing 2626 kVs. This one's doing 2675. They're there. I mean, differences in the weather. But the thing is, yes, these are the same amps, but look at the degrees. 51 versus 48. This is 3 degrees less. This is better. This is a little more torque for similar speed. I'm not saying it's the same speed. It's similar. Now, yeah, somebody might say, well, that's 5 kVs times the voltage. That actually makes quite a difference in RPM. Not that much, really, I wouldn't say. I mean, 50 times, let's just say 8, that's 400 RPM difference. I mean, I really don't think that'll make much of a difference after all the gearing reduction and all that good stuff. But anyway, maybe that'll make up for the torque, so we can say they're very similar. Maybe. Let's see, 4.1 to 4, all right. Well, actually, this one's better. I mean, you could argue it's the 0.1, but here, this one edges out. So lower timing. Let's see. I don't have anything that's here. It's in between. It's in between. But anyway, the Surpass definitely competes with Trinity there. So that's something to keep in mind. So let's just say it's $90 versus $110. I have no idea what that one's going for. I don't even know if that one's still on sale. I wouldn't buy it. I would just get the slot machine. Speaking of which, if we go over here, so now we have Surpass. I'm going to jump over to slot machine just because I mentioned slot machine. I'm going to go based on timing. Based on timing, 49. That's the closest I have to 48. 2609. Now, to be honest, the slot machine does have less kV than the Trinity Xfactor. It's so much nicer. It's so much nicer, runs cooler, everything. I would take the slot machine over the Trinity anytime. Sorry, they're both Trinity. Over slot machine over the Xfactor anytime. But here, let's see. So 48. All right. So KVs, they're spot on. I'm going to say they're spot on the KVs. Now amps, 5.3 versus 5.6. So the slot machine definitely edges out the Surpass there. Do you have any others that I can compare? 4.1. All right, let's do a 4.1. I have 4.1. So you're 2510, 4.1, 2498. I mean, this is a slot machine competitor right here. This one does in 2 less degrees though. So here, 4 degrees, the Surpass will take it, but you're probably not going to run it at 4 degrees. You're probably going to run it closer to 5 degrees. So once you get closer to 5 degrees, well, you would be between those two numbers. Oh my God, it's in the air. I would honestly, price point, that would be interesting. So we will see, but such great quality on this motor, really good quality on this one as well. But let's see. So Hobbywing, let's compare these. So I don't really have anything between. This is a G4. I really like this motor. Like I said, I've used this one a lot. Let's see, we have a 4, so that 4.1, so we have 2498, so let's call it 25. So this one, yeah, a lot more kV. Degrees, we're looking at 2 more degrees for about 100 kV more. And we can see that over here too. Yes, there's a 0.2 difference, but the Hobbywing is definitely a faster motor for similar amps and timing, about 2 degree difference. So I would expect the Rocket RC V6, I think, probably performs similar to the Trinity slot machine. So if you've run Trinity slot machines and you've been contemplating getting something else, the Rocket RC might perform similar. If you want something similar but a little less expensive. And now we have the Phantom. What can I compare the Phantom? So there's the 5.5. This is what I set my Phantom. 5.5, this is the reason why I have this. So we'll say that's close enough. So 2626, 2952. So that's actually a pretty big difference. Timing is very similar, so 48, 49. But that's how it holds. So if we look at some of the other motors, this one is already at 57 degrees, 4.6 amps. And I made a comment, if you're running spec, this one, you're going to run out of timing. Your amps are going to be very low, so you're just going to have to gear to the moon. Notice the KVs are very low. So this motor is probably a motor I would use with additional timing through the ESC. That's probably more than likely where this motor shines, which is not what I do, running spec. So that's something to keep in mind. And the much more, let's see, 5.4, 2886. Now this is an Outlaw motor. That's what has the little skulls, if you saw my video on that. But let's see, compare the Phantom edges it out. And then, but it's still faster than the Surpass. Yes. All right, so based on this, let's see, so the Phantom is faster than this one, but this one's going to perform similar to the Trinity. So long story short, if you're wondering how the Surpass Rocket RC V6 performs, I would say this is actually a good quality motor. It's very good. Definitely compares to the Trinity slot machine. I'm not saying it's better or it's worse. I'm just saying it, based on this, it hangs in. Hobbywing and Phantom, I mean, it would be something to kind of play with the motors, run them. Like I said, I'm curious how the Rocket would do. Now, one of the things that I really like is I like the design, and I'm wondering how the cooling works. Now, the wires did seem to be a little thicker on the windings, but again, that could just be, it's probably because of the design that it might be deceiving. Maybe they're the same windings, but I'm going to have to say that I was definitely impressed with the Surpass, especially that price point. I think at price point, considering it appears to keep up with the Trinity on paper, I would say that's definitely a motor to try out and see how it runs. And then if you think about it, if you run a year, race for a year, that's pretty good. It was less than $100 and you got a year's worth of racing. I don't know what everybody has a different opinion on what the lifespan of a motor should be, but I think a year of continuous racing, going to say, at least 2 races a month. This is qualifier, making it to the A. That's pretty good. Well, that being said, I hope all of this information was informative, hopefully useful, at least entertaining. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.